Hey everyone, Cleo here, and today we are starting my March wrap up. So it is the 4th of March, and I'm gonna do my first vlog clip for it because I want to get back to filming these as a vlog rather than what I've been doing the past 2 months, which is filming them way past the end of the month. But so, we're getting off to a good start in March, so here we go. I, on the 28th of February, kind of impromptu decided to give you guys a poll. I had put a poll up on my community tab asking how to start my month of March. Whether I should read something just like a mood read, or whether I should be responsible and finish some of the 5 books that I was currently reading at that point in time. And you guys chose for me to be responsible at the start of the month, and so I did. And I actually went a little bit overboard, so I've actually finished 2 of my 5 current reads, and so currently I'm down to 3. Not really, because I've already started something new. But so, I am going to be doing that for the entirety of the month. I'm going to be letting you guys decide what choices I make. It's not going to be like what specific book, but it's going to be something like, should I mood read or should I be responsible, something like that. Not always, of course, but these types of questions is what I've been throwing your way in the month of March. But so, the first book that I finished in March was The Undertaking, I'm gonna have to hold it on the other side, The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon. This is a Fairy Loot book. Basically, this is a book that I got through Fairy Loot because I wanted to have the Babel book, the Fairy Loot edition for Babel, which came the next month. But I am quite happy with this one. This, first of all, is a gorgeous edition, and this is basically a You've Got Mail fantasy reimagining, let's say. And my first qualm with this one was that originally it was like too close to You've Got Mail. You've Got Mail is very close to my heart, and so in the beginning it just leaned so heavily into that. It was just so reminiscent of it that it just made me want to rewatch the movie. So in this one we have 2 main characters, Heart and Mercy. Heart is a marshal who's basically going off into this sort of like parallel world, let's say, where there are these sort of like zombie type ass creatures, let's say, that he basically hunts down, and whenever he kills one he kind of brings them into the funerary home where Mercy works for her to process them and like give them a respectable service. And so these 2 did not hit it off. Like the first time they met one another, a sort of animosity originated, and so they cannot stand the sight of one another. However, they also will start a secret correspondence with one another without realizing that they are corresponding with one another. So, as I said, originally very much leaning into the You've Got Mail storyline, and it's only around like the midway section or like even past that that I started to really care for these characters and started to enjoy the way that this story was starting to deviate from the original, and that I, fell completely in love with it. And by the end I was even tearing up, so by the end it turned into a success, but originally I really struggled through this one, which is also why I didn't get to finish it in the month of February, because, I just really wasn't eager to keep on picking it up. But I'm happy now that that turned around. Sometimes when you push through, it does have its reward. Not to say that, you should not DNF, but sometimes it can turn around, and this one was a case like that. Second book is one that I also continued through even though I shouldn't have. So the fact that I was reading 5 books at the same time towards the end of the month, and for the majority I was not really enjoying any of them, is like a lesson that clearly I still haven't learned. But so at the end of December, I believe, I started The Dark Between the Trees by Fiona Bartlett, which was the Howling Pack book club for that month, and I started it. I knew I wasn't going to be able to finish it that month, and so part of the reason why it lingered for so long is also just the fact that it was never a priority for me, and so I made it a priority at the beginning of this month because of that poll. But also I was just really not having a great time with this one. So in this book we have a group of female researchers going into a mysterious wood that's basically isolated. It's like a no trespass zone because of some myths surrounding the woods, and one of them being an entire company of soldiers that I believe during the Civil War ended up stranded in this forest, and only one person was ever seen back. The rest of the company mysteriously died there. And there's also this sort of like legend of local family going even further back in the past who also ended up like losing their lives or going missing there. And so this group of female researchers is going into the forest to kind of try and figure out what happens. This story is told intermittently through two timelines. We have the timeline of the Confederate soldiers, and then we have the timeline of the current female researchers. And so it is an eerie, dark atmosphere type of story in which curious stuff happens all the time, but you know, almost the entirety of the book you don't really know what's happening. So it's definitely sort of like cosmic horror, where the horror lies in the unknown, lies in not really knowing what is going on. And I did enjoy the ending of this one. This one has a type of ending, a type of open ending that I really appreciate in books, especially in books that kind of have that unsettling, uneasy feel to them. But the majority of the book I did definitely struggle with this one. It was a real slog for me. The fact that you would kind of have more or less the same thing going on in both timelines meant that it felt like even slower, because one thing would happen to the Confederate soldiers and then a similar thing would happen to the present day researchers the next chapter, and so it was always like that. It always seemed to be repeating itself, and that is of course part of the concept, the fact that, you know, these researchers are kind of going in there to try and figure out what happened, but they're basically experiencing exactly this. But they're basically getting more than they bargained for and experiencing the same sort of deal is definitely part of the concept, but it definitely slowed down the pacing to an excruciating level for me. But so yeah, I finished that one, happy with that, and now a new poll has been selected for me, and so now I get to mood read, and so I'm going to be reading Ghosts by Dolly Alderton, and I'll check in with you guys once I finish that one. Hey guys, so we are probably more than a week beyond when I last updated you guys, but so last poll that I did was asking you guys whether I should mood read or whether I should like catch up to War and Peace, and you guys gave me a nice little break by saying no, mood read. And actually mood read 2 books to some extent. I basically chose 1 book to mood read, and at some point I wanted to play The Sims and I needed something like easy to listen along to while doing so. So I also listened to A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, which is a sequel to A Psalm for the Wild Build, which I read in February. And like with Psalm for the Wild Build, I don't really have much to say about it. I enjoyed it, it was wholesome, it had nice messaging to it, but it is also a book that didn't really particularly touch me, or that I was particularly like impressed by. It won't have much of a lasting impression on me, sadly. I do still have hopes for trying out some of Becky Chambers' other books in the future. Then the book that I mainly mood read is gonna be my second 5-star of the year, and that is Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. So this is basically a book about a woman in her 30s. She is single, she has no children. Most of the people in her direct surroundings have like gotten married, got kids, did the whole sort of like traditional life path, where she is still on dating sites trying to find her perfect match. A lot of this was very relatable to me, being a woman in my 30s, with most of my friends being in steady relationships with children, and so a lot of the things were quite relatable, and so some of those elements were very relatable to me. The whole sort of like dating scene was much more relatable to me. In my 20s I already didn't really have much of an interest to continue dating and all that. When I got to my 30s, aside from being relatable in parts to me and my story, I also just really emotionally attached myself to the story of her father, who is dealing with dementia. Throughout the novel we will see his struggle with dementia and the way that dementia takes a firmer hold on his life and kind of changes his interactions with people around him, and those sections really became to be quite heartbreaking and difficult to read through. But so overall this is a book that I found very engaging. I kind of struggled at the very beginning, but then kind of flew through after like the first 70 pages or so of this novel. It constantly kept me engaged. I loved the witty voice in this one. There were definitely a few scenes that made me kind of chuckle, and there were more than a few scenes that there were definitely a few scenes that also made me cry. And so when a piece of art can do both, can make me laugh and cry, then it is a 5-star. However, around the same time I also had to release another poll, and that was to ask whether I should DNF a certain book. To be fair, by the time in which the results were coming in, I already had made up my mind. Basically, the moment I posted that poll was kind of the sort of trigger for me to be like, you know what, I am done with this book, and that is Curse of the Mistreat by Jenny Wirtz, which is very sad because Daughter of the Empire and the entire Empire trilogy, which is co-written by Jenny Wirtz and Raymond D. Feist, is one of my favorite fantasy series of all times, but this one just didn't do it for me. This one was very much kind of overwritten and very complex as a result, and I am somebody for who in fantasy particular easy writing does it. I prefer my writing as a tool, especially in fantasy, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot have thought out the writing, but I want to immediately understand the sentence when I read it, basically. A lot of times I feel like in fantasy there's this tendency to kind of overwrite, to the sense where I'm sometimes left rereading lines a few times to be like, wait, where's the verb in this line? Why am I not making sense of this? And this constantly was happening with Curse of the Mistreat. Aside from that, I did enjoy the story, and that is the reason why I did go through 300 plus pages of this book. Basically made it halfway through this book before I gave up on it, but it was just taking me way too long, and the complexity of it just made me lose interest with it after a while, especially since the plot seemed to be not really moving forward after a while. There were certain things about these characters and the setup that made me interested in and that made me excited to continue, but then it seemed like nothing ever really got done with that. And so as a result I decided, you know what, for me this just isn't working out, and so I DNF'd this one, and it's 2 sequels, which means in one go I've like 3 books less on my TBR, which was not the goal, but still. This is another case in point of do not buy books before you've read the first book in the series and liked that one. But so yeah, lesson learned again, and we will continue. But yeah, bad experiences aside, this does now mean that my TBR is nicely reduced. I think it's currently at 17 books, and I am at this like onset of finishing another one, because at that point in time I posted another poll when I was very close to finishing Ghosts to indicate, like to ask you guys whether I should focus on my current reads or whether I should try to squeeze in a Spanish book. And this is the poll that did not go the way that I had hoped it was gonna go. Now, to be fair, of course, I don't give you any details when I give these questions to avoid the choice for particular books influencing your decisions, so I keep them somewhat vague. And so if you had known that I was only reading 2 books at that point in time, being War and Peace and Sapiens, a non-fiction, maybe you would have voted differently, but yeah. So I have been, for the past 2-3 days or so, fully focused on continuing on in Sapiens, and I think I might still finish it today, and so here's hoping for that, because tomorrow I'm hoping to start a secret project, and so I will hopefully dedicate a full week to that secret project at that point in time. And so if I can get Sapiens done, that means that the only thing I have going on is War and Peace, which is going to be a year-long read-along, so you know, it's fine that is on my currently reading, but it kind of means that I'm starting that secret project with a clean slate, so here's hoping. Hey guys, so it's been a while since I last talked to you guys. So since last talking to you guys, I did still finish 2 more things this month. If I'm looking a little bit disheveled, it's because I feel like I'm battling a cold at the moment, so I'm hoping that that will go away, but I definitely needed to film this update still today. So one thing that I finished that I already kind of mentioned in the previous clip is Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. This is a general approach to history writing, looking at the big waves of history, the big evolutions starting from Homo sapiens all the way to modern times. I did enjoy it, I did find it very interesting. On the other hand, I also feel like nothing really stuck with me about this read, and that, you know, a lot of it is written from the hindsight phenomenon, being that we know where history ended up at, and so we're writing from that perspective. So all in all, I was left a little bit disappointed just because it had been getting so much hype throughout the years that I just like built it up to like unachievable heights in my mind, basically. But it is good to know that, you know, I enjoyed this one, but I didn't get so much out of it that I can now kind of remove the other two works by him from my TBR, because I didn't enjoy this one enough to be excited to pick those ones up as well. And then after finishing Sapiens, I did still read 3 more books that I'm not really going to talk about in this video. I will link to another video in which I talked about those specifically. So I read 3 books for the International Booker Prize, being Pyre, Standing Heavy, and Boulder. So these 3 books, if you want my opinions about them, you can find them in that video. I will probably do a similar video in April, but my April is looking pretty packed, and it might not be the highest priority, so we'll see what ends up happening. And then the final book that I finished in the month of March is one of the big successes for the month, and that is God Killer by Hannah Kaner, I believe is the author's name. I will have it up on the screen. This one was like a surprise. I basically just picked it up somewhat on a whim because I had asked you guys what to do, whether I should start like my one obligation read for the month, or whether I should just still fit in a sort of like book club book or not, and you guys voted for the latter, when I was like, okay, I don't actually have time for that, so I was looking for the shortest one, and the shortest one was this book, God Killer, and I really enjoyed it a whole lot, so thank you guys for pushing me to read that one in the end, because I don't know whether I would have otherwise, because this has such a generic sort of like premise that it didn't really appeal to me. But the very great thing about this book is that this book is actually filled with disability representation as well as queer representation. Especially the queer rep is very sort of like, you know, casual. It's just like thrown in there. There's no judgment made about people who are queer. There's no sort of like there is no sort of pause going into it to like reflect on the fact that somebody is queer, if you know what I mean. You know, normally the fact that somebody is queer is kind of indicated as being something of note about this character, and here it just felt like thrown into the wind, very much indicating that queerness is very much normal within this setting, so that was absolutely amazing. And then for the disability representation, in part it is also equally like casual, in the sense that there's a lot of disability representation in here that we do like nothing with, and even with the disability representation of the main character, it is not like her disability is featuring into the plot line a lot, or it's like featuring into her character development, for example. However, I won't necessarily call it fully casual neither, because we do spend a lot of time exploring what her disability means to the way that she lives her life. But I absolutely enjoy having a more casual approach to disability in fantasy as well from time to time. But you know, I always love disability representation in any type of book, especially in fantasy. I definitely want to see more disability representation, and you can do it like this as well. You can do it this casually and it still works, because we need all types of representation. And yeah, I just really enjoyed that aspect to it. Aside from that, it's just really a fun, plot heavy, sort of like fast moving story. So we are looking at this woman who is a god killer. Basically in this world, the more that gods kind of are worshipped, the more they grow in power. And at one point in time, this basically led to this big catastrophe happening. And at that point in time, most of the gods were killed and the worship of gods was banned. And so this god killer is now going around through the country, kind of responding to the need of people who see the rise of a god, and then she kind of has to kill this god and like destroy their temple to stop their worship. Along the way, she encounters this young girl who's asking some suspicious questions, and when this young girl's family ends up killed, she will travel together with the god killer to kind of try and find answers. I know that the book has been getting some mixed reviews, but I personally really enjoyed it a whole lot. It was one of those experiences where, you know, I just kept on turning the page and found it very difficult to put the book down. I went through it really quickly, and as I said, I really enjoyed that sort of like casualness to the disability representation, to the queer representation, and so I'm very happy that I picked this one up, because this was definitely one of my lower anticipated releases for 2023. And with that, we are at the end of my March reading. I did still read the majority of another book, Kushiel's Chosen by Jacqueline Carey, but that will go into my April wrap-up because I only finished it on April 1st. And so with that, let's just add the tally of the books that I acquired during the month of April to whatever number has been on the screen up until this point, and then we end up with a TBR of 16 normally, and yeah, that is a great number, but I will say that I'm filming this on April 2nd, and I can tell you that that number has definitely climbed. In the months in 2023, I have basically been adding my ebook purchases to that number as well, and up until this point in time, so up until like in January and February, the only ebooks I purchased were books that I actually also read throughout that month, and March would have been no exception if it weren't for the fact that I didn't finish Cushiel's Chosen on time. And so the ebooks for Cushiel's Chosen is part of that number 16, but as I already indicated, it is actually already gone. But as I also already indicated, the number is still higher. I'm going to be rounding off this video here. Definitely let me know what you've been reading in the month of March. Have you been having a great time? My reading was kind of so all over the place, but there were some really good books in there as well, so that is always a plus. But so yeah, let me know if you've read any of these books and what your thoughts were on them, and then I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!